So I'm trying to make a mount for my Onan NB engine here so I can make it a stationary display at the mow-in and show people how the ignition modules work. So look what I'm up against. The main problem is that on the Onan NB, it doesn't have an oil pan like a Kohler does where you have like bolts that come off the side or whatever. Just a flat oil pan. There's actually four little, almost like, I'll call them bumpers under there, little round things the size of a quarter that are flat. But the only way to mount things is through these four bolts for where it would mount onto the transmission of a Model L. Let me show you what I'm thinking of doing here. Tell me if I'm nuts, but I'm thinking of taking a piece of angle iron like this, cutting it to length, drilling a hole here and a hole there so that it will go into these two bolts. And then on the end, down here, I can make a piece that goes vertical down, and then I can have another piece across the bottom that we can bolt into the actual wood of this Harbor Freight dolly, and hopefully that would hold it here and hold it upright enough that we could run this thing for a few minutes as a display. That's my hope anyways. All right, so this angle iron here is a piece of bed frame I saved because I figured someday I would need this metal. And I think it will work out fine going across the bottom here. The only big issue here is that there's kind of a ring around here. See this lip? So if I bolt this on there, it's not going to bolt up true because it's going against that lip. And I'm not going to cut a notch for that lip. That would be, oh, maybe I could. Depending on where these holes are going to line up, if I only have to notch out a little bit there, I might be able to do that. But anyways, that's the idea. So what I'll do is I'll have to drill these two holes and center them in this thing. And then when we get this thing upright, I'll cut another piece that will go across the bottom. This is 12 inches wide. I made this piece 13 inches. So I was thinking that I could weld an angle iron in the sides or something. I don't know, but I just want it to be a little bit bigger. That may come back to haunt me, but that's how I'm doing it. So I'm going to cut another 13-inch piece just like this. And then it's a matter of trying to drill these holes for the proper spacing here. Well, I got a little welding going on here. And we're getting this stand figured out. We got the angle irons across there and bolted onto the block. We got some welds on the end here holding the angle iron onto the side. And now what I got to figure out is I wanted to put a tall piece on this side. Maybe not quite this tall, but I'd like to make a control panel where I can mount the ignition module maybe and mount a key switch and a solenoid so that we can start this engine just hooking it up to like a jumper pack or something. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it about just below the top of the dipstick, and then I'm going to look for a piece of sheet metal that I can attach to it and make a little control panel on. All right, let's see what we can figure out. All right, so I'm done for tonight. It's almost 10 o'clock and I've been having fun out here playing with this thing. But here's what I'm going to do. Tomorrow, I'm going to cut a piece of steel plate that's about 5 inches by 5 inches. So it'll come out here. I'm going to have it more or less be like a flag, if you will. And what I plan on doing is I bought this little solenoid on Amazon. It was like 12 bucks. And I want to mount that to the back of the plate like this. So it's facing backwards maybe. I got to think about this. But anyways, I'm going to mount the solenoid to it. And I'm going to put an INDAC key switch on there also. And I'm just going to have it come out here like it's a little control panel. And you can turn the key here. And it'll just be a wire that goes from this over to the starter here. And you can use that to start the engine. And we'll take another wire that will go to ground. And there's plenty of grounds on this thing. We're going to use a jumper pack to jump it. So We could just have a ground go right to one of these bolts where the frame bolts onto the engine. That would be appropriate too. But that's kind of what we're going to do here. And then we're going to have to mount that coil onto that plate also, the LS2 coil. So we'll figure it out somehow. All right, check it out. I made a little control panel. I got a key switch. On the back, I got a solenoid. Got my ignition module going over to the spark plug. Got to hook up my crank trigger and a couple wires to the starter. And we should be good. All right, so I got everything all wired up here on the Onan NB electronic ignition test stand. And I'm ready to crank it over and see what happens. So I hooked up a spark tester and a battery pack. Let's check it out. Here's my battery pack. I got all this wiring here all hooked up, hopefully. I got my crank trigger mounted. I got the spark plug wire up here. Let me get that out of the way. I don't want anything to hit the input gear on the flywheel there. And I don't know. Let's just see what happens here. I'm going to turn it on and I'm going to try to crank it. Let's see. There was some spark. Now, we're going to try something really dumb, which is squirting some carb cleaner in there. Let's see what happens now. Oh yeah, baby, it's gonna run. I put some more carb cleaner in. Let's see what happens this time. All right, so the video that you just watched was from last July of 2020. Today is Valentine's Day, 2023. So I basically never touched this since then. Over the weekend, I did some more work here. Stay tuned. All right, so we're going to be installing this crank trigger on my friend Eric's Onan NB at the blow-in next weekend. So the first thing I'm going to do here, I'm going to make him a brand new bracket. And the trigger you just saw me build in the series of videos is staying on my engine. But he needs a bracket. So I'm going to build a couple brackets just to have, you know, one in stock or something. But I had made a template years ago for making the bracket. So let me show you that. So I had these little pieces here that I made for the template. So the first thing we need to do is cut this piece here off, drill 2 holes in it, no big deal. So I'm just going to mark this with a Sharpie and cut it. This is a 2-inch wide stock. I don't know how thick it is. Maybe it's an 1/8 inch. Not very big. Doesn't need to be heavy duty. Just has to hold that trigger. So let me just draw a line down here and we'll cut it. I'm actually going to cut maybe 2 or 3 of them and make a couple of these templates or brackets. I got enough pieces here to make 3 brackets, and I cut them with a cutoff wheel. Now I'm taking a grinder and just dressing them up and getting the burrs off and just cleaning them up a little bit, and then we'll drill the holes. So the way this works here is that you have a big hole and a little hole, and that's how the original modules were, and it allows the piece to kind of move up and down a little bit. So what I did is I put the template over my new one. This is a 15/32, and that's a 5/16. So I just kind of put a little touch off mark in there to get them centered. I'm actually going to go to the drill press and use a smaller drill bit, like a 1/8 or something, and just work my way up to the size we need. Where the trigger goes. So I drilled 2 holes, and then I'm going to use the cutoff wheel and a Dremel to connect them and make a slot, basically, so you can move the trigger back and forth and line it up exactly where it needs to be. So we'll have 3 of them, and then they basically get welded onto this bracket at a certain angle, which we'll come to in a few minutes. So I've taken the Dremel tool and made a slot in these things. And you just got to make sure that a 5/16 bolt can go through it. And if it can, you're good. So I got two of them, 2 out of the 3 all figured out. This other one here, if you're not exactly wide enough when you cut it, the bolt won't fit. So I gotta shave a little bit off the bottom here. You see that little nub there? Just gotta hog that out a little bit, and we should be getting ready to weld. So number 3 is all set. Cool. So let me show you my jig. Here's my little jig. It's a piece of wood ripped at the right angle to get this mating up here. And I have this piece screwed on here. On my template, I have a little notch here that says like how far it should stick over the edge. So I basically just transferred that onto here. And what we're going to do is we're just going to weld it under here. Then we'll flip it over and do a little weld on the back. So I'm going to go over to the welder. All right, let's weld this sucker up. Cool. You take the screw out. My first time using this helmet. I'm trying to get used to it, but some big old globs of weld on there. Should be strong. Not the pretty weld I was looking for, but it should be strong. I feel like the wire's feeding too fast right now. All right, that's one down. 2 more to go. Cool. All right, so I got all 3 brackets welded up, and I got wiring harnesses for 2 more triggers made. And we're going to go down to Kennett Square, Pennsylvania, and we're going to deliver this to my buddy Eric. And we're going to hopefully have it installed on his Onan and get this sucker running. It'd be awesome. So stay tuned for more, and subscribe, guys. I need some more subscribers. So if you're not subscribed, I'd appreciate if you subscribe. Thanks a lot.